Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And on Caicedo, obviously there's been links to Manchester United. We know that Chelsea are leading that race. There's a report from The Athletic this morning that states that Man United have held talks with Moises Caicedo's representation about a potential move. Simon Stone has somewhat corroborated that United are looking. But as far as you're aware, is this still more likely to be a Chelsea signing as opposed to anybody coming along and hijacking it?
Well, there's always a chance of hijack, obviously, but I think with Chelsea, they're pushing, and Caicedo can be termed the top target at the moment, and it is going to be a little bit of a circus over the coming week or two, I would imagine, as we get a lot of games and reports over different fees and prices. But I'll stick to what I've always reported, regardless of this 120 million price tag, regardless of this 100 price tag. All sides, in terms of sources, have told me that 70 plus 10 is the yardstick, is the number. And Chelsea obviously agree with that because they came in with a rejected bid about 3 weeks ago of 60 million. And you don't come in at 60 million as a marker bid if you think that the player is going to go for 120 million or you're prepared to pay that. In fact, I don't think I've ever covered a transfer where the starting bid and the end bid have been 60 million apart. And that tells you everything. If someone low balls and ends up overpaying, the maximum gap tends to be 25 or 30 million. Even that is seen as pretty big. So if Chelsea have come in at 60, then it probably means they don't want to pay over 85 million. And it also probably means that they accept that they're going to have to pay 70 million plus. So at that point, you start forgetting about the specific number and thinking about the structure of the deal. Because maybe 70, 75 can get it done with a preferable structure, or maybe you do go up to 85, but how gettable are the add-ons? Chelsea's add-ons are not as gettable now as they have been historically. So that's another factor in all of this, that if you're Chelsea, you might say Champions League football triggers an add-on and be delighted with that, because if you get Champions League football next season, you're happy to pay the extra money. And if you don't, you've protected yourself, because you've not got Champions League football and you don't have to pay that outlay on the add-ons. So it will sort of be interesting to see how the negotiations take place. Brighton's position has changed on Caicedo since January. When Caicedo signed his new deal, it was made very clear between all parties that he would be allowed to leave this summer. So for a reasonable offer, for a fair offer, clearly Brighton is still going to be tough to negotiate with. But if the number hits something that's reasonable, Caicedo will go. So I still think we're looking at a ballpark of 80 million. And I've said this for months. 70 plus 10 is what industry sources say will get the deal done. And now we have to wait and see whether Chelsea will come in at that, or whether it will be a different kind of structure, or whether Brighton can get that 4 or 5 million more. And I think that this week, Chelsea will move. The personal terms are pretty close with Caicedo. I would expect that to be the simplest part of the deal. He doesn't mind joining Chelsea without European football. And then in terms of complications, Manchester United, there's not much in it. They've had a historical interest, but it's very telling that the Caicedo interest got pushed by Manchester United sources at around about midnight, and then the following day after the Mount bid was rejected. So there's an element of games here. If Manchester United want to spend that 50, 60 million, they want an attacking midfielder, they want a traditional number 9, they might need a goalkeeper. So adding a player like Caicedo, of course, they would love him, but can they afford him? And are they going to move for him as a priority position over others? I would say the answer is no. I think that Arsenal's interest has been focused on Declan Rice, and they still may bring in another midfielder. But at this point, they've not moved again for Caicedo. But we have to understand how the Rice situation pans out, because, of course, if they did fail to get Declan Rice, then they might well come back in for Caicedo. But at the moment, and we should be very clear, only at the moment, because transfers are fluid, Chelsea have got a clear run.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. And as you say, it's as of right now. And I did see when all the United hullabaloo was going on, somebody sent me a quote from Fabrizio's that Caicedo wants Chelsea and Chelsea want Caicedo, and personal terms are almost agreed. And I said, oh, great. Why didn't you quote me in the next line that basically said, unless Man United start to attack the situation, which doesn't mean they will, but that's what fans have got to realize, that nothing is a foregone conclusion. Anything can happen, but you're right. And I believe the same. Everything you've said is my belief, but my belief is based on what the likes of yourself and other top journalists have told us. And you're better to live within the reality rather than in the hope, in my opinion. This year,
just one other thing as well, like
go
it's
on.
very easy to create a neat narrative in the window and have it in your head. Like Rice wants Arsenal, Arsenal want Rice, West Ham want to sell. He's going to Arsenal. Caicedo, Chelsea. Player wants Chelsea, Chelsea want the player. Why haven't they moved? Why haven't they bid? It's not quite that simple, because a player may agree personal terms with a club, may say they want that move, but it's never as black and white as to say only that club until it's signed, because you just never know. And if we've learned one thing from multiple transfer windows, it's a player can want a club and not get the club, and then they have to walk into another club and suddenly they want that club. So Mason Mount may want to stay at Chelsea if they suddenly table the perfect terms for him, but he also wants to move to Manchester United. And similarly, Mudryk wanted Arsenal, but now he wants to be at Chelsea. And Rice wants Arsenal if everything goes to plan. But if for whatever reason Man City did make a bid and it was the best bid and Arsenal walked away, then you suddenly hear Rice saying, I really want to play under Pep Guardiola. So players have to be careful. It's a bit like if you've got a job interview and you are positive that you're going to get that job, and you say all the right things in the job interview that you want the job, and then you tell all your friends that that's your job. And then you have a second job interview, and in that job interview, you got two choices. Are you going to say in that second job interview, I'm so smug and sure that I'm getting the first job, I'm going to tell them that I've got another option, I've got a better option, I'm going to put out there that I don't want the second job? Or are you going to do the other job interview and say all the right things to give yourself two options in case the first job that you think you're going to get falls through? And then if you get the second job, you're not going to walk in and go, hey guys, nice to meet you. It was actually my second choice. I actually had another option. I wanted that other option, but I'm here anyway. Let's make the best of it. Of course not. And this is the same with footballers, that yes, Declan Rice has a priority. Yes, Moises Caicedo has a priority at this stage, but you're never going to be quite categorical about it just in case something changes. And it's the same on the club side as well. So it's really easy to create a narrative as fans just saying, how's Rice not done yet? How's Caicedo not done yet? How's Mount not done yet? Because it's obvious that everyone's pushing in the same direction. And yeah, that's logical, but it is a bit more complicated than that behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And I think that anything can happen. Man United could sign a player tomorrow who suddenly turns ahead of another player they're chasing. As an example, the Man United ownership could change, which suddenly people, hang on, okay, well, that's gone through now. Maybe I'm going to look at that club a little differently. We've seen new managers change the minds of there's no way James Rodriguez, with the profile he had at the time, signs for Everton unless Carlo Ancelotti's there. So anything can change in a window. So yeah, people just stay open-minded about that, I would say. This here says, is there anything concrete? We'll come back to this one in a second. I just want to stay on Chelsea for 1 sec. This here says, chances of Chelsea moving for Osimhen this summer.
Well, we know that they're looking. Napoli's perspective is not for sale. Where they've been a bit inconsistent is that now they're starting to say, unless an astronomical offer comes in that's in the interest of the club, which is actually code for hit the number and the player will be for sale. So Osimhen wants the Premier League. Chelsea and Manchester United would be very keen, but it's financially difficult at this point. And Napoli's perspective, even though there's an element of debate over this, is that they paid for the player a total package of 80 million euros. And the reason why there's debate over this is because not all of that was guaranteed fee. And there was a player swap, and there's a whole backstory here around whether the valuation on those players that went to Lille was actually inflated. But Napoli say the total package is 80 million, including add-ons, including player swap, including cash. And I think the cash element was pushing 50 million euros. So they're taking 80 million, Napoli, and they're doubling it effectively. And they're saying 150 to 160 million euros is the number that we would consider. Because why would we sell the player for 100 million euros when we bought the player for 80 million euros and he's been in red hot form? And this is the challenge for suitors. But the player would be keen on the Premier League. And actually, a lesser known fact about Osimhen is that before he joined Napoli, he had an offer from Manchester United and he very nearly took it. But he spoke to a friend of his in Igalo who was at the football club at the time. And he realized that he'd actually be behind Igalo in terms of game time and the pecking order to begin with. And if Igalo was not getting that consistent game time or in the starting 11 every week, then why would Osimhen be in the starting 11? So he thought to himself, it was too early to move to Manchester United. But Manchester United is always a club that Osimhen has had a soft spot for. But I just don't think that Manchester United can make those finances work under either new ownership or existing ownership, unless they abandon their pursuit of the midfield and of a defender and don't even bother with a goalkeeper. They'd have to basically put all their summer budget towards Osimhen, and it might drag on throughout the summer. So Chelsea could be there. I still think Dusan Vlahovic and Chelsea is one to watch as well. And the other thing with Chelsea is that just because Nicholas Jackson has arrived, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to move for a traditional goal scorer. So keep an eye on Vlahovic. Osimhen is possible. I think it would be unthinkable that somebody doesn't at least try from the Premier League. Why would you just sit back and take the Napoli valuation and we don't want to sell effectively and use that to not explore the deal more seriously?
Yeah, of course.
But the other thing to point out is that Osimhen and Napoli have a, in principle, but not signed 2-year extension. So if it drags on, or if Napoli continue to price the player out of the market, then there is a possibility that Osimhen just says, okay, I actually don't think that Napoli are going to budge on price here. I want to settle my future and I am just going to sign that 2-year deal. So the basic framework of that deal is near ready to go. But obviously it's not been signed because Osimhen is keeping his options open. So I wouldn't rule out Chelsea making an approach. And if they do so, then with Nkunku already in and all the other players that they signed in January, plus Nicholas Jackson, they would have incredible depth and young talent for the future. And this is all Chelsea really need for all of the debate over the ins and the outs and the swollen squad size and the financial aspects. And for all of last season's mid-table mediocrity, if Chelsea add one player that is near guaranteed to get them 20 plus goals, then they're going to be in for a very successful season.